There's something eerie about driving alone at night. The hum of the tires against the asphalt, the darkness stretching endlessly beyond the reach of your headlights, and the nagging feeling that you're the only person left in the world. I never used to mind it. In fact, I preferred driving at night. Less traffic, more peace. But after what happened on that lonely highway, I don't think I'll ever travel alone again. I had just finished visiting an old college friend in another state. The plan had been to leave before sunset, but time got away from us. We'd been reminiscing, drinking, and before I knew it, the clock read 11:47 p.m. My buddy offered his couch, but I declined. I had work the next morning, and I wanted to sleep in my own bed. The drive was supposed to be 5 hours. I told myself I could handle it. I had driven late before. I'd just stop for some coffee, play some loud music, and power through. The roads were mostly empty, just a long stretch of highway cutting through miles of dense forest. The glow of my dashboard was the only light inside my car, and the rhythmic sound of the tires rolling over the pavement was oddly hypnotic. My coffee sat half empty in the cup holder, its warmth fading, and I forced myself to take another sip, hoping the caffeine would keep my mind sharp. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the rearview mirror. My grip on the wheel tightened. It was quick, just a shadow, a shift in the dimness behind me. I glanced back, but my car was empty. Just my duffel bag and my jacket sprawled across the back seat. I shook my head. I'm just tired. I turned the music up, trying to push the creeping unease from my mind, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I kept catching glimpses of something in the mirror, just at the edge of my vision. A shape, a figure, sitting right behind me. Every time I turned around, there was nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe my jacket was positioned weirdly, or maybe my exhaustion was making me imagine things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The sensation of being watched was suffocating. About an hour into the drive, I spotted a rest stop, a small, lonely building with flickering fluorescent lights. The parking lot was completely empty. It didn't feel welcoming, but I needed a break. My heart had been racing for the past 20 minutes, and I told myself I just needed a moment to breathe. I pulled in and turned off the engine. For a few seconds, I just sat there, gripping the wheel. The silence was oppressive. My ears rang from the absence of noise, the car suddenly feeling too small, too enclosed. Then, I made the mistake of glancing at the building's glass window. In the reflection, I saw my car, and someone was sitting in the back seat. I turned so fast my seatbelt locked, my breath catching in my throat. But when I looked with my own eyes, nothing. The seat was empty. The air inside the car felt thick, heavy, like I was inhaling something I shouldn't. My chest felt tight. I didn't go inside the rest stop. I didn't need a break anymore. I needed to get out of there. I slammed the door shut, locked the car, and sped back onto the highway. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the dread curling in my stomach. I made a decision. I wouldn't look in the mirror again. For the rest of the drive, I forced my eyes to stay on the road ahead. Even when I felt that unbearable weight pressing down on me, like someone was sitting right behind me, I refused to check. The miles stretched on, endless and suffocating. The trees lining the road blurred into dark smudges, the road itself disappearing into the black void ahead. Every muscle in my body was tense, my knuckles white against the wheel. Then I heard it. A whisper, low, raspy, right behind me. Why did you stop? A chill shot through my entire body. My vision blurred for a second, and my fingers twitched on the wheel. I hadn't imagined that. Someone, something, had spoken, right in my ear. I pressed my foot harder against the gas. The car sped up, the trees whipping past in a dark blur. I didn't care if I was going too fast. I just needed to get home. But the whispering continued, software crooning, almost playful. You shouldn't have stopped. I wanted to scream. My entire body felt like ice, my stomach twisting in knots. The air in the car felt suffocating. It was like something was pressing down on me, squeezing my ribs, making it impossible to breathe. And then, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I looked in the mirror, and I saw him, a man, gaunt, pale, his skin stretched too tightly over his skull, his lips curled into a grin that didn't belong on a human face, His eyes, empty, black voids, locked onto mine. He was sitting directly behind me, close enough that if I reached back, I could have touched him. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. I nearly crashed the car. My vision swam, my limbs tingling with adrenaline. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. The next hour was a blur. I don't even remember getting home. The next thing I knew, I was pulling into my driveway, my entire body trembling. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at my house, afraid to turn around, afraid that if I did, he would still be sitting there. Finally, with slow, jerky movements, I turned my head. The back seat was empty. I exhaled a shuddering breath. It was over, or so I thought. The next morning, as I was trying to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, I remembered my dash cam. My stomach twisted. With shaking hands, I grabbed my laptop and plugged in the footage. The video played, the empty highway stretching before me, my car moving smoothly down the road. Nothing seemed unusual. Then, around the halfway mark, I saw it, a dark shape, flickering in and out of the back seat. At first it was just a shadow, a blur, but as the video played, the shape solidified. A man, sitting perfectly still, watching me. I felt bile rise in my throat. Then, the moment came, the moment I had turned around in the rest stop parking lot. On the dash cam, I saw myself step out of the car, and the man in the back seat. He turned his head to watch me leave. That was the last time I ever drove alone at night. And to this day, I still don't know how long he had been there, waiting, watching, smiling. I had been driving for hours. The night was dark, the kind of blackness that swallows the road beyond your headlights. There were no streetlights, no other cars, just me and the endless stretch of pavement cutting through miles of thick, shadowy forest. I wasn't too worried at first. My gas tank was getting low, but according to my GPS, there was a station about 10 miles ahead. Then, my phone lost signal. The screen froze, the little loading wheel spinning uselessly. I cursed under my breath, but kept driving. It's fine. It's just a straight road. But then I saw it, a gas station. Not the one my GPS had shown. This one wasn't on my map. It appeared out of nowhere, a small, dimly lit station sitting just off the road. A single gas pump, a convenience store, and a flickering neon sign that read, "Last Stop." Something about it made my skin crawl, but I needed gas. I pulled in, the gravel crunching under my tires. The place looked old, too old, like it had been there for decades, untouched. The lights inside the store were on, but the windows were darkly tinted. I couldn't see inside. As I stepped out, the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, as if the atmosphere itself was pressing down on me. The usual sounds of the night, crickets, distant rustling in the trees, were completely absent. It was silent. I reached for the pump, but there was no card reader, just an old-fashioned slot for cash. Annoyed, I decided to go inside and pay. That's when I noticed the man standing by the door. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was tall, gaunt, dressed in an old gas station uniform that looked decades out of date. His skin was too pale, his eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in years. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to get back in my car, but I needed gas. Forcing a smile, I walked up to him. "Hey, do you take cards inside?" The man didn't answer. He just stared. I swallowed, trying to ignore the way my skin prickled. Can I get $30 on pump one?" Still, nothing. Then his mouth moved, but he didn't speak. He mouthed something. 3 words. "You should leave." A cold chill ran down my spine. "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His lips moved again. "You should leave." The fluorescent light above flickered, and then I saw it, the reflection in the glass door. Behind me, standing just at the edge of the dim light, was another man. But he wasn't moving, he wasn't breathing, and his face, it was the same as the man in front of me. Same sunken eyes, same hollow features, like a copy. A perfect, unmoving copy. I felt my legs lock in place, my breath hitch in my throat. The man in the doorway suddenly moved, fast. His hand shot up, gripping my wrist with a strength that sent a sharp pain through my arm. His eyes, now wide, almost desperate, locked onto mine. And this time, he spoke aloud. "Get in your car and leave, right now." Something about the way he said it, something about the pure terror in his voice, snapped me out of my paralysis. I yanked my arm away, stumbling back. My heart was hammering, my mind screaming at me to listen. I turned on my heel and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I threw myself into my car, slammed the door shut, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I hit the gas so hard my tires screeched against the pavement. As I sped away, I dared one last glance in the rearview mirror. The gas station was gone, just empty road behind me, as if it had never been there. I drove for miles, my knuckles white against the wheel, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Finally, I saw another gas station, a real one, brightly lit with other cars parked outside. I pulled in, my hands still shaking. I needed to know. I walked inside, my voice unsteady as I asked the clerk, "Hey, do you know if there's another gas station down the road? One that looks old?" The clerk frowned. "Nah, man. There's nothing between here and the last town for like 50 miles. I felt my stomach drop. 50 miles. That wasn't possible. I had stopped. I had seen it. I had spoken to someone. The clerk must have seen the look on my face because he hesitated before speaking again. "You all right, man?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to ask if he'd ever heard of anything like this happening before, but I didn't, because somehow I already knew. That gas station, that man, they weren't supposed to be there, and neither was I. I paid for my gas, got back in my car, and kept driving. I haven't taken a road trip since, and I never, ever stop at gas stations that aren't on the map. I had been driving for hours. The two-lane highway stretched endlessly through the empty countryside, flanked by thick forests on either side. No other cars, no street lights, just the glow of my high beams cutting through the night. I was on my way home from a friend's wedding, several states away. The reception had run late, and rather than paying for another night at a motel, I decided to push through the long drive. Bad decision. The night felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I was running low on gas, so I started keeping an eye out for a station. That's when I saw him, a figure, standing just off the shoulder of the road, a hitchhiker. His silhouette was illuminated by my headlights as I approached. A man in a dark jacket, hood pulled up, carrying a small duffel bag at his feet. He stood completely still, one arm extended, thumb pointing upward. I don't know why I stopped. I never pick up hitchhikers, ever. But something about him, I don't know. He looked normal enough. I was exhausted, and the idea of having someone to talk to for a bit didn't seem so bad. So, against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. The man didn't move at first, just stood there, like he hadn't expected me to actually stop. Then slowly, he bent down, grabbed his bag, and approached the passenger side window. I got a better look at him then, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Pale skin, sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light. His face was expressionless, unreadable. I rolled down the window just a crack. "Where are you headed?" He hesitated before answering. "South." His voice was flat, almost distant. I nodded. "I can take you a few miles down. Hop in." He didn't thank me, just opened the door, slid into the passenger seat, and set his duffel bag at his feet. Something about the way he moved put me on edge, slow, deliberate. I pulled back onto the road, gripping the wheel a little tighter than before. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tires rolling over the asphalt. Then, out of nowhere, the man said, "Long drive ahead of you, James." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him my name. My grip on the wheel tightened. "Do we know each other?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the corner of his mouth twitch. "No." Silence. The air in the car suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease. "How do you know my name, then?" He didn't answer right away, just kept staring straight ahead. Then he said, "I know a lot about you." A cold chill ran down my spine. I pressed my foot harder on the gas, my mind racing. Had I left something in the car with my name on it? A work badge? A piece of mail? No. The only things in my car were my overnight bag and an empty coffee cup. I swallowed hard. Like what? His lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile. Your house has blue shutters, he said. You leave your kitchen window unlocked at night. My breath caught in my throat. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Your dog's name is Cooper. I nearly slammed on the brakes. Every hair on my body stood on end. How the hell did he know that? My heart was pounding now, adrenaline surging through me. I forced myself to stay calm. Have you been to my house? He didn't answer, just kept staring at me. His eyes cold and empty. Something inside me snapped. I needed him out of my car. I spotted a rest stop sign up ahead. I gotta stop for gas, I said, forcing my voice to stay casual. You can hop out here. The man didn't argue, didn't even move at first. Then, without looking away, he said, You shouldn't stop. A heavy silence filled the car. I felt my hands go clammy against the wheel. My mouth was dry. What? The man blinked slowly. Don't stop. Something about the way he said it sent a wave of pure terror through me. Then, before I could say anything else, he reached down and unlocked the passenger door. I barely had time to react before the door swung open, and he was gone. Vanished, like he had never been there. The car was still moving. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching against the pavement. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. The door was wide open, the passenger seat empty. I turned in my seat, scanning the road behind me, but there was no one there, just the empty highway stretching back into the darkness. I sat there for a long time, heart hammering in my chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but no matter how many times I replayed it in my mind, I couldn't. He was just gone. Finally, with trembling fingers, I reached over and shut the passenger door, and then I drove. I didn't stop. Not for gas, not for coffee, not for anything. I drove straight home, not daring to look in my mirrors, afraid that if I did, I'd see him sitting in the back seat. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the first thing I did was check my kitchen window. It was locked. I checked every room, every closet, every shadowed corner of my house, but I already knew. He wasn't here. But that didn't mean he hadn't been. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I checked the passenger seat of my car. There was only one sign that someone had been there, a single footprint pressed into the floor mat, and a name, my name, scratched faintly into the plastic of the glove compartment. I don't know what I picked up that night. I don't know how he knew me, or why he left, but I do know one thing. I will never pick up a hitchhiker again.